Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi. Great, hello people.
Good evening.
Hola.
Good day. Yeah, we're doing this one at the time that's more convenient for the Australians, I hope. So it's evening there, it's morning here. It's still very early. Oh, I'm on one of those gas lift chairs, it just sunk. And it's early morning in America. So it's very possible when Mark or Scott wake up, they might join us as well, but who knows? I'm not going to force them to get up early. So I messaged Ray the other day and said to Ray, hey, do you want to come on again? Because we're changing the time. And as Corey calls it, this is the B team, the Australian team. But I'm not sure B team is a fair enough thing. Especially as Arran's on it all the time. Corey's on it quite a lot. You know, Ray's become a regular. We could call it the Oz team, maybe. Do you use the word Oz in Australia?
Not really.
No, Aussie gets used, but yeah, not really Oz.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, here's Mark. Great. Good morning, Mark.
There he is. Complete with mood lighting.
Yeah. See, I've got light coming because it's daytime. Mark's got no natural light when it's early in the morning.
No, way earlier.
I'm great you could be here. So yeah, so I messaged Ray and I said, what could we talk about? Any ideas? And Ray coincidentally has just had some, sorry to put pressure on you, Ray, groundbreaking discovery. I said we need to give Paul Reed Smith a call at the end of this and tell him what's been discovered. Because as Ray's pointed out to me, Ray, as you've seen before, Custom Unlimited Designs makes 3D printed guitars, sells the files nice and cheap so you can make them yourself as well. And he's recently made the same guitar twice. Is this right, Ray? Same guitar twice out of different plastics, but everything else is the same.
Everything else is exactly the same.
So it's a bit like the equivalent of making a guitar out of different Tonewood. Let's do it like that. I love these guitars. Very cool. But what was the discovery?
Can the microphone just fail for a second before I admit this? They are, so just to clarify, they are made from the different materials, but they use the exact same hardware from same supplier. And the pickups all meted out the exact same. They have the exact same pickup height. And when you plug them in, one after the other, they sound different. And everything I know says that they shouldn't sound different. They should sound the exact same. And this is an argument that I've had many, many times. I'm sure you guys have all had arguments as well with people. Material doesn't make a difference.
So before we go further, the hardware's all the same, but you buy in the necks as well. The necks the same as well.
Not quite. One's got a so they're both maple necks, except one's got a rosewood fretboard. And if that makes a difference, then it kind of goes back to exactly what I was saying, because different materials change the tone.
So before we carry on, because you did some tests, before we carry on with the test, in that notorious Paul Reed Smith video that we talked about recently, he did mention that he used to say that the fretboard material made a difference, But then he was saying that he's slightly, I think this is what he said, he'd slightly changed his mind because he realised when you're fretting your notes, etc., you're not really touching the rosewood at all, or the fretboard at all, so it's really minor, and maybe the difference is more in the playability of it all. But could it be that that's the difference? I don't know.
Good question. I mean, look, for me, I used to be an acoustic player for a very, very long time. So quite often when I play an electric, I mean, I use heavy gauge strings, or not heavy, but basically I use 10 to 52s in standard tuning. I clamp those bad boys down, so quite often my strings are actually touching the fretboard. But really, you know, I'm almost having like an existential crisis with this because it's not supposed to make a difference.
Well, Ray, I already had my existential crisis, and this is the conclusion that I came to. I don't want to live in a world where all guitars sound the same. And I don't know if it's like magic or mojo. I don't even want to peek behind the curtain anymore. Like, I don't want that illusion to be broken for me. And I don't know what it is, right? Because I've seen white papers from universities who've done studies on this. And then we've had these anecdotal evidences by people, by builders saying there's a difference in materials. And I don't know anymore. And I don't know if I want to know. Maybe it's just a ghost in the machine. I don't know. But it's magical, and I don't want to ruin that magic.
I think that's a really good point. To me, it's a double question. It's one, does the material make a difference? Secondly, does it matter? At the end of the day, does it really matter? If I was to say that these two guitars sounded completely different because of their material, that would be wrong. They don't. They do sound very, very similar. However, there was a distinct difference between them. And yeah, look, I can understand and not wanting to understand the ghost in the machine. You know, leave the mystery there. But on the same hand, I got to know. I have to know the answer. Why is it so?
Yeah. And one more note, Ray. One of the things that I heard really early on, years and years ago, Ola Strandberg had done a little experiment with his son. It was like a school project. This was years ago. And one of the really cool things they did for this Tonewood experiment was they had a machine with the plectrum. So the plectrum action was actually mechanized because the player's hands makes a difference. Even your hands, right? So when you're playing one guitar and playing the other, that variable is something you can't control, right?
Exactly.
You're playing differently, right? And so you need to have some kind of mechanized action to strike that string. And I just read another paper by a university in Portuguese, or maybe it was Spain, where they actually had to build that mechanized plectrum because you need to have a unique, uniform action to strike that string to actually capture that data. And so I think when everybody says it's in the player's hands, there's a lot of truth to that because even when we play, we're playing differently every single time.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, that's why we practice as well, because we're trying to get that consistency.
Before we get into the science of it all, can I put a couple of things out there about why maybe we do want to know that different woods make a difference and why we wanted to know that. So this is just my thoughts, and I'd love you all to chip in. First of all, if you were someone just buying a guitar and you're buying a model that a factory produces, you want to know, I think you want to know, that you're going to go out and buy this particular model and all the guitars in that model sound the same. Do you want to know that? Do you want to know that if you're buying it online, it's going to be the same as buying it in a shop? Personally, I used to love going to shops and trying out all the guitars to see which one sounds right for me. But maybe you want to know that everything is consistent. And maybe as a manufacturer, you want to know that, oh, actually, I want to get this sort of sound, so I'm going to use this material. We know 100%, we know from some of our previous guests, like Willis Howard and Arran, that the materials that you buy for the wood for your acoustic guitars do make a difference, and the thicknesses do make a difference. But do we want to know that field for our electric guitars even?
I think we have an idea of what it sounds like from listening to other musos play them or seeing musos play live. And I think that's, you get an idea of what you would like when you're wanting to buy a new guitar. I mean, when I bought, a Fender Strat was what I wanted as a teenager and eventually got. And I remember when I was looking to buy one, I went to a shop in Melbourne that had secondhand guitars. And this was, mid-90s. So the guitars they had were like 1970s and 80s Strats. And I remember playing a lot of them and actually really put me off because they all sounded and felt different to each other. And in my head, I had this idea that if all Fender Strats are going to sound the same. And playing all these secondhand ones, which, some of them would be quite expensive now. I ended up going back home to the local guitar shop and ordering in a brand new Fender Strat because, that in my head, that was what I wanted. And I still clearly remember that they all felt different to play. They all sounded different. And I mean, they're over, they might have been 10 years apart in the years of them. But that was an early sort of realization that, all Strats sound different and all Tellys will sound different and all Les Pauls sound different. I think a lot of it is we have an idea of our head of what the guitar sounds like that we want. But when you actually sit down and play it and listen to it, when you've got the air coming out of the speaker and it's moving that eardrum, is very different than watching someone do a Tonewood test on YouTube with compressed sound and editing software and all those kind of things that have gone in. So I think that's where the research that Mark's sort of talking about. I think that's the interesting stuff. That my belief is that anything that you put in a guitar, the components must impact the sound in some way. It just depends on how much that impact is and if you're going to hear it or know it or care about it.
Yeah, and I think it's that last part that is the biggest thing. Like even if you know it, doesn't matter. Does it really matter? Like one of the things that I noticed with those two was that I first noticed when I was playing them acoustically. Being a thin line, thought I'd just see just how bad does a plastic guitar sound acoustically. It turns out when you make them out of ABS, they actually sound pretty good. And that was what kind of led me into the whole why is it so sort of thing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, no, it doesn't really matter what it's with an electric, what it's made from. I think the only thing I really think or feel, or more so than anything, is that just like with wood, I tend to think that a heavier wood or a hard wood will have more sustain than like a guitar made from a soft wood. I think that's something we can all kind of agree on. Yes? No?
Well, back to what Mark always mentions about Jim Lill's experiments. I totally believe that the wood might have more sustain that you feel when it's touching you, things like that, but it's not coming through. When you listen to it through the amps, that makes no difference.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So like Jim Lill did the air guitar, which it was just like there was no body whatsoever. It was just a table and another table, strings and pickup. It sounded exactly the same. But then you have all these detractors in the comments were like, well, the table itself is resonating, right? But that Honda motor you put onto the whatever is got weight and that's resonating. So what kind of like tone engine was that? What kind of tone table was that? But we never talk about the entire signal chain also when we talk about tone, right? No one talks about guitar strings. Nobody talks about plectrums. Nobody. And plectrums make a huge difference in your tone. Gigantic. Nobody talks about speakers. Nobody talks about the air molecules in the air. Nobody talks about people's eardrums, right? There's a giant signal chain here. Now, let's not go there, but I still want to hear a little bit more about the types of plastic, Ray. Like, can you talk a little bit about like the different types?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's probably 1,001 different types of filaments that can be used. You know, like looking at my shelf here, I can see I've probably got, and we're not just talking about colors, we're talking about like actual types of material. I've probably got 6 or 7 different types here. However, the ones that I use predominantly for the guitars is ABS, which is what things like your bumper bars on cars and stuff are made from. And then the other one is PLA, polylactic acid, which it's kind of known as the greener option for materials. You know, it's considered to be recyclable, all that. But look, at the end of the day, it's not really. It can be recycled, but it requires a different process. Yes, the plastic can break down, it's biodegradable, but it, you know, just takes a couple of thousand years. So, yeah, it's really no different to any others. Where they do differ, though, apart from thermal properties and things like that, is their density. So, ABS has a density of about 1 gram, or between 1 to 1.05 grams per cubic centimetre, and PLA is sitting at about 1.5. So it's almost half as heavy again. And so that's where I started to look when I was comparing them to wooden guitars. And when I went down that rabbit hole, what I found was things like your softwoods. So basswood has a density of about 0.6 grams per cubic centimetre. And then I can't just say hardwood has, but you know, all your different types of hardwood tends to vary between 0.8 to 1.1.
So sorry, I'm losing track a bit of numbers.
Yeah.
First of all, with the 2 different types of plastic, how do they compare density-wise to, say, a softwood or a hardwood? Are they closer to the hardwood then?
Yep, closer to the hardwood. In fact, ABS is basically the same density as a hardwood.
Right. And
so,
do you know how much your guitars weigh then, the bodies?
It varies and it's actually really controllable. General rule of thumb, the body alone will weigh between 2 to 2.2 kilos.
So Ray, when you're talking about density, when you're printing your guitar bodies, is it a solid fill, or are you doing like an infill? It's a percentage. Like, are they completely solid?
It's an infill at a percentage. If I was to make them completely solid, they would be far too heavy. They would be, definitely way too heavy. For instance, the Telecaster here, which I made a bit too heavy. This Telecaster weighs in at about 6 kilograms. So definitely a bit more than what you want it to be. Whereas I think a standard Tele will run 3.9 to 4 kilos. May not even be that heavy, actually.
So it feels like where you're going with this then could be like, okay, so this material has a fair amount of density that resembles or similar to wood, and it is providing a fair amount of sustain. And I've read in with certain anecdotal evidence that because certain materials have a resonance, that peak resonance actually could translate to the magnetic field of the pickup. I don't really believe that, but there's people saying it.
Yeah, look, that's a load of horseshit. I mean, essentially, at the end of the day, a pickup is... I mean, the magnets in the pickup we don't even really need, technically. It's just there to keep the strings ringing. But I don't know, man. It's a really hard one.
Who knows?
What I did find was that the guitars made from 100% PLA, no ABS in them at all. When you play those acoustically, they are very dead. They are very flat. And all you can pretty much hear is the strings themselves. There's nothing coming from the body. Now, the only thing that I can attribute this to is the fact that the PLA is so dense. It's, like a hardwood is, 1 gram per cubic centimetre roughly, and the PLA is 1.5. So it's almost like it's, you have to beat the living daylights out of the guitar strings to make that plastic resonate, get any sort of vibrations from it. Whereas ABS, being closer to hardwood, it's much easier. And it kind of, what reminded me of that was the instance of I've got an Australian-made Cole Clark guitar. And one of the things that, most people who have played either a Cole Clark or a Maton will tell you is that the guitars have an extremely thick soundboard on them. I measured mine and it was 4.5 millimeters thick. And then I measured another acoustic that I've got here and it was 3.5. And one of the things that I've always said with the Cole Clark is if you try to lightly finger pick it, it's got no life. It sounds terrible. However, when you hit those strings and you hit them hard, the guitar comes alive because it takes so much energy to get that soundboard moving.
A side tangent there, the Cole Clark guitars, because I've been to a few shows where they've had, Lloyd Spiegel, who is the face of the player for Cole Clark guitars, and a few, I don't know who it was, people in management. But the Cole Clark guitars are designed to be plugged in and played live. Like that's how they kind of engineer things and their pickup system with the piezo pickups and the however they design it. And because they're their new hybrid model that they have kind of done to rival the Fender one. Really interesting. Lloyd Spiegel was demonstrating and explaining, and and that kind of makes sense for what you're saying about the thickness of the soundboard and the acoustic quality of it. That part of their design and research is that it's an acoustic guitar, so it'll sound like an acoustic guitar, but they're designed to sound best when they're plugged in, mic'd up through a PA rather than acoustic to your ear.
Yeah, well, an interesting thing with the Cole Clark hybrid is that, so long story short, I had to take the Cole Clark in for repairs. I had a big split down the back from being in a very humid conditions and a very dry condition. Sorry. Anyway, as typical happens when you go to the Cole Clark factory, the CEO comes out, drags you around the factory, and gives you a tour, and was basically led me through the whole factory again, and showed me where they were making those actual hybrids. And one of the things that he was really excited to point out was that his hybrid is one of the first ones of those like the Fender Acoustasonic or whatever it's called, that actually uses phosphor bronze strings and a typical electric guitar pickup. However, where that pickup differs is that it's custom designed for phosphor bronze, and it's hand wound. Well, not actually, no, it's not hand wound. I saw a machine that does it. They have this. It almost looks like a Meccano set pickup winder that they've got made, and that's winding the pickups to their specifications. And they also have a gas burner sitting off to the side with a saucepan, and it's filled with wax. It was really interesting to see, such a high-end guitar, and it's just like there's a Meccano set pickup winder and a saucepan filled with wax.
I'd love to get up there for a look around the factory. That sounds awesome.
So the Cole Clark, I've just put one up on screen because I've not come across them before. with what you're saying, the hybrid, it's essentially a proper acoustic guitar with an electric guitar pickup put in.
Yep.
Yeah, I think when you were scrolling through before, I recognised. So it was towards the bottom. Yeah, those ones there, I think. Yeah, with the pick guards. Yeah, yep. Variations of that, and yeah, they talk about the difference between acoustic guitar strings and electric guitar strings, and then pickups being designed to pick up the vibrations of different things. So it's really interesting to hear them speak about it. And yeah, Lloyd Spiegel, who's a brilliant blues musician, an Australian guy, he's kind of the face of Cole Clark, and to hear the session I went to, who was demonstrating the different combinations and talking through it and what was being changed and adjusted, and blend controls, all those kind of things. It's really quite interesting.
How are they grounding the strings?
Not sure. I am not actually sure. It'd be worth looking into, though.
Corey, if you come across,
I've got my brain ticking now, looking at that, going, how do they do that?
Yeah.
All right, what was that, Daniel?
I was wondering if you'd come across them as well. Like, are they really popular in Australia?
I know local stores got them.
Right.
They use a lot of native timbers too, don't they?
They're a Melbourne-based company, so both Maton and Cole Clark are Melbourne-based, and they both they use Australian timbers, and a lot of Cole Clark probably they go for the ones that probably look nicer. Like, I love the look of the Cole Clark guitars, whereas Maton, since they sort of build based on acoustic qualities and more traditional, they still have pickups and all that kind of stuff in their guitars, but they're kind of going more for the Tonewoods they're going to make a good acoustic guitar, whereas Cole Clark are probably going for the more of the timbers that look different or appealing, which I really love.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that so when Cole Clark first started, I was working in a music shop in a little country town in rural Victoria, and one of the guys that used to come in was basically a woodcutter on the side, and every now and again he'd fall a particular type of tree, and then you'd sell that 4 or 5 meters of that tree to Cole Clark. They'd come along with a truck and trailer, pick it up, and they had a guy that came out with a mobile sawmill and basically slice it all up at their factory. Now that was 25 years ago, I think.
Yeah, was that down the Otways way? Yeah. Another interesting side note. So the Blackwood that both Cole Clark and Maton use is from the same forest area that the Blackwood I use for the Invitational Great Guitar Build-Off guitar, and the Blackwood that I've got, that was recycled from a Blackwood cabinet that my parents had years ago, and it was pretty much the same area that the wood came from. So it feels good. It feels good using timbers of pretty much the same forest. And a guy that I've actually got a commission for a guitar that I'll start later in the year, and he actually knows. He got a lump of figured Blackwood for the top, but it pretty much is from one of the guys who does the sourcing for a lot of the timbers for Maton guitars. And basically, Maton guitars, he was saying that they've kind of got enough of their figured Blackwood like in stock. They actually don't need any more at the moment. So yeah, my mate sort of got a slab of this figured Blackwood that normally would have gone to Maton, and he's kind of got it aside, drying out in his shed for me to build the guitar out of in a few months. So yeah, a few little tangents and things going on.
Well, what I found really cool was, that was their process 25 years ago, buying timber from, local tree loppers. And when I went there 6 months ago to drop this guitar off, and they were doing the exact same thing. they were still doing that. There was still two big, trees laying down on the side of the factory that they were waiting for the mobile sawmill to come in and slice it up. They had their own drying kilns and an entire shed dedicated to basically timber drying.
Mm.
It was a lot of fun to walk through.
So, Ray, if we step back to your
side
yeah. What did you tell me? I can't remember if you mentioned it in your message. Have you, other than just listening, did you do some measurements of the sound outputs to see if there was a? Sometimes you see people doing their demos on YouTube and they're looking at oscilloscopes and stuff like that and sound waves.
Yep.
Great.
So it's the best that I can do is basically taking the two guitars, recording just basically hitting an open chord, a couple of different open chords, but it's still introducing too many variables. Where was my palm resting on the bridge and how tight was I holding it to my body? However, I was then, basically I put one guitar over to the left, one guitar over to the right, dropped them over. And yeah, there was a distinct difference between the two. The one in PLA had very little bottom end that when compared to ABS, things like that. On the same hand, it still looked very, very similar. But is it, was that test worth mentioning or showing? No, not really, because there's just way too many variables. It's just I need a one of those machines with a plectrum hitting the strings for me.
But still, even if there's lots of variables, you're noticing a difference. And as we were saying, it comes down to the player playing the guitar and noticing these differences. It's interesting.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, I didn't need the to overlay the sound wave over the top of each other to tell, because the whole reason I was doing it was because I didn't have the question of, do they sound different? It's just like, no, I know they sound different. That's I didn't want to believe it. It was more just doing that just to kind of prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy, I guess.
Yeah, but back to your question that you keep asking, does it matter? Does it matter in the end when we're going to plug this electric guitar into an amplifier and into a speaker that is going to change that sound, right? Because your amplifier and more specifically your speaker are going to change what that guitar sounds like. So yes, maybe materials have a marginal difference in the way this guitar sounds, but in the end, does it matter? Because we're going to be running it through so many other pieces in the signal chain.
Yeah. Even the fact, I'm a very simple person when it comes to my signal chain. Essentially, I go compressor straight into the amp. A lot of times I don't even use the compressor. But even still, how long had the tubes been running hot for? Or had I just fired it up? What was the temperature on the day and how was that affecting the voice coil of the speaker? There's too many different things. and really, you know what? When you look at the sound difference between the two guitars, I probably just could have turned the bass up on one and it would sound exactly the same as the other.
What I'd be intrigued to see is doing another one, identical one, but in one of the material you've already used, and just comparing two of the same. See if that again makes a difference. The problem with science is it's almost impossible to be so precise for a scientific test in the setups we have at our home with our cables, our amps and stuff, and as Mark say, our actual playing. I mean, oh, my chair's gone again.
I was actually waiting for that. I was half expecting you to start just sort of sinking down throughout the show.
No, if only it just does a sudden drop. But so the thing that is obvious, but it hadn't occurred to me, of course, the implication is if it's doing that with plastics, it does that with wood as well. The wood potentially would make things. All that anecdotal stuff we mentioned earlier about guitar builders saying they've heard the difference. Possibly that's real.
They might have. They actually might have.
Here's the test. Here's the test, Ray. I'll have to take a drive up the highway soon, and I'll have a play of the two and see what I think. See if I can get a second opinion on how they sound between the two.
They're right here, mate. You're welcome to any time.
I'll have to arrange that some stage.
So I'm going to throw something else out there. Oh, but just before I do that, are there any other plastics you can print with as well?
Yes. Yeah. Mine's drawn a blank at the moment. So obviously you've got your ABS PLA, as I've mentioned. You also have what we call PETG. You then got nylon, polycarbonate, polypropylene, polystyrene. Man, there's a lot of polys. And then, of course, on top of that, there's different blends that you can have of plastic as well, and different ingredients in them. One of the popular ones is basically mixing, so taking your base plastic, your base filament, and then mixing in things like glass fiber or carbon fiber. And I just got some stuff in at work that been looking forward to trying. It's a filament called ASA, which is very, very similar to ABS, but it's got Kevlar mixed through it. So we're going to try printing some chest plates and shoot me with some plastic bullets and see what happens.
There's a market for bulletproof guitars. I'm sure of it.
Could have helped time, babe.
It would just be cool for people to say, "Oh, my guitar's bulletproof." I want you to team up with some university where they're doing some sort of research and do research into the sound properties of all these materials. I'm sure it's the future. I'm sure there's going to be a future where people are selling their 3D printed guitars with their different plastics, and you can pick.
Yeah, look, I do wonder where the future of 3D printed guitars will go. You know, is it going to replace traditional wooden guitars? No, never. But it does bring in some really interesting potentials, I guess you could say. You know, I guess one way of looking, you could look at it is, okay, when you buy a Strat or a Les Paul or something like that, you're buying an instrument for life at that point. You know, you always think when you're buying this guitar, it's just like, I'm going to have this forever. Then of course, you know, global economic crisis comes along, you sell half your guitars, and you know that dream long goes. But that's always the intention that you have when buying it. I honestly think of a lot of these guitars as, you know, you see behind me here, as almost disposable. I don't think disposable is the right word, but it's replaceable at any point in time. You know, I've got the white with purple and the purple with white up above. If I get sick of that color, I can just reprint them. I can just make them again. Although, I mean, they're made from PLA. I think I might need to do them in ABS now. And
you also had that element of some of your guitars where you glue bits, but somewhere it just doesn't glue, it just fits together. So I guess, is there the option of like the one behind, you've got the top on it.
Yep.
Is there a way of you could just have the guitar and reprint a different design on the top?
Look, I'm sure with some work you could, but even the ones that like the jigsaw puzzle design and all that, they are still glued. My biggest concern is because it's been asked before, can I do the top and have it held in place with magnets? You're like, yep, certainly could. But I can also imagine the vibrations and rattles that you're going to start hearing through the guitar. So to test the strength of them, one of the things I've done is I actually put a pipe underneath one of the guitars and rolled over the top of it with my car. And it was fine, and it's still flat. Now, the thing that I found was that, afterwards I reassembled it back into a guitar, and the infill that was inside of it must have been damaged during that. And consequently, whenever I play that, I can hear a buzz coming from the center of the guitar somewhere. It doesn't get amplified. You can't hear it when plugged in, but I can hear it, and I can also kind of feel it to an extent. So there's that kind of thing to it. But yeah, I drove over a guitar with a car.
That needed to be filmed for YouTube. There was a period where one of my daughters was just watching videos of cars driving over things, toys getting squashed, bottles of drink getting squashed, food getting squashed. It's just the amount of millions of views these videos get. It's bonkers. But anyway, look, I've mentioned before a separate podcast I heard, the Chasing Tone podcast, where Brian Wampler was talking about tube amps and how he thinks tube amps potentially could be dying out because the younger generation aren't that interested in hearing them. It's not like our generation where maybe a lot of the bands we liked, the sound came from the tube amps. Now they're just really happy with their modelers and stuff. So I just wonder if certain guitarists end up playing 3D printed guitars, whether the people that are getting into guitar playing now, if their idols are doing that, will start doing it as well, and it will start to become much more popular.
Yeah, look, I mean, I guess if it's going to happen, that's probably going to be one of the ways that you'll see it, is that, some artists, struts out on stage packing a 3D printed guitar, and someone else goes, that's cool, I want one of them.
I definitely want to talk about this a bit more in a minute, because I've got the Guitar, the shop chain, did their top 20 guitar poll recently. Headlines. And I definitely want to talk about that, because I think some of the guitarists in that are in it because the shoppers at Guitar have started playing guitar because of those people. And it's not because they're virtuoso guitarists, it's because they play guitar and sing. And these people want to play guitar and sing.
Well, it was influential guitarists, wasn't it, that list?
Sorry, Aaron, I missed that.
I just said it was, wasn't it, the most influential guitarist rather than the best or whatever. So yes. That kind of makes perfect sense that someone that might influence you to want to play the guitar and buy a guitar from a guitar shop.
Is it someone that had snot on their hand during the week or what?
I've missed a story here.
I know. I've missed something there too.
Picture of her wiping her nose or blowing her nose while she was performing and trying to rub it on her outfit and then dripping everywhere.
Well, maybe I should go.
All had to be boogie hanging out of our nose while we're playing.
I just wanted to share one more thing before I got into that list, which is, I guess, connected to the idea of the Tonewood Debate, which is I've found a new guitar company I started following, Uber Frank Guitars, and this guitar is made out of wool. surplus
what?
wool embedded in bioresin. Here's a finished version of it all. I'll read the text on it next to it. Here's the solid wood spellbinder. I think spellbinder must be his design that he uses, or the woolly caster. I'm building a guitar from sustainable tactile material made from surplus wool and bioresin here in the southwest of England. The idea was to build a unique looking and resonant instrument using as many low impact materials as possible and to avoid the use of wood entirely. Chambered solid wool body, solid wool neck with weight relief, bamboo fingerboard, clay inlay dots, cork binding, green cast recycled acrylic pick guards, and old stock or reclaimed hardware knobs. I mean,
okay. First off, for me, it's like, it's cool. It's cool, like it's made from wool. Sort of, kinda. At the end of the day, to me, I look at it and it's like, it's made from resin with wool in there.
Yeah.
And, like, I've seen some really cool, resin guitars that have, different things added into it. I love the look of it. I really like that look, definitely. But on the same hand, there's also the Fruit Loop guitar that was on YouTube not long ago. I actually had a tone serial debate on that video. There was Fruit Loops versus Cocoa Pops and things like that. There's also the guitar made from dried leaves. Yeah, cool concept. What at the end of the day, it's dried leaves filled with resin. And then what was the other one? There's one from Geppetto's builds that I absolutely love. The Telecaster, and he basically cut up 100-year-old piano.
Oh yes.
And the guitar, like, is highly polished resin finish, and there's the keys, there's the hammers, all of that's right throughout the guitar. And again, it's a resin guitar. It's just resin is a great material for trapping and viewing other materials.
So for me, what I like about it is just trying to find a different material and to be sustainable. So from what I gather, the bioresin is something that is also made in the UK, so low carbon footprint for him to get there. It's partly made from waste products as well, so it's maybe more sustainable than some other resins. I was wondering if this person, I think it's named Richard, is someone to get on the show at some point, along with, there was another person that messaged me the other day who, let me just stop sharing a minute, who makes guitars trying to be sustainable. He uses all of his wood is something he's harvested himself from a forest nearby. So it's all really close, not reclaimed, wood that he's collecting. And he was asking me if I knew any UK-based makers of tuning pegs and things like that, again, to keep the carbon footprint as low as possible. Although saying, once you sell them, they might end up going all around the world. So there's still that carbon footprint.
Hey, Daniel, I have a little bit of experience with bioresin. So years ago, I bought some hemp wood, which is just hemp fibers embedded in a bioresin, and they were able to extrude these planks like normal timber. And I built a guitar neck out of hemp wood. And one of the issues that I was having was that resin wasn't really strong enough to adhere those fibers together. So I was getting, I could grab the wood and I could do that. I could crack it. So I get that they were trying to have this bioresin be again sustainable and non-toxic. There was a lot of benefits to it, But the con to what I experienced was it just wasn't really strong. And in the end, I had to actually use real resin to coat the whole neck to actually keep it together.
Interesting. I wonder because with the wool, if it ends up being more like a glass fiber, where you've got in glass fiber, you mix that in with the resin, and the strands of that give it the strength.
You would think the same thing with hemp too. Like you would think the same thing with pretty much any material.
Okay.
I just think from like you have this industrial scale resin that's being built, then you have a bioresin. I just don't think that they're equivalent yet, at least in my experience.
I must apologise to everyone that's watching live. I've just noticed there's 51 messages in the chat that I haven't noticed before. Does anyone want to say anything more about Tonewood? Otherwise, I'll share that top 20 list from Guitar.
I just want to go on record as saying is that even though I've said that there is a difference between different materials, at the end of the day, Tonewood is a myth. Just to clear that up.
Yeah, I wonder if they're the Tonewood is such a minor thing to the tone that it really matters.
Yeah, well, look, what I could tell you is that between those two, while there is a difference, if you were to blindfold me and play one and ask me which one was it, I couldn't tell you. If you were to play one and then the other, I would be able to tell you which one was which. But that's only purely and simply because I know that one of them has more bottom end than the other. That's the only way that I can tell them apart.
We've got a comment in the stream, Corey, about your hat. I asked you about your hat the other day.
I
was hoping you were wearing. You don't have to say. I was hoping you were wearing your one that said Saul Good Guitars on it.
No, I went for a walk to Savo and I wore that, so I got a bit sweaty. No, it's yeah.
So
I wanted one for a while, and I was just like, no, I'm okay.
I'm going to share that top 20 list, and what I'm intrigued how many of these people we've actually heard of. Like some of them I know exist, but I don't think I've ever listened to them. Maybe if you're watching along as well in the chat, you can tell us. Like to me, the Strokes, Albert Hammond Jr. from the Strokes. The Strokes seem like I understand they're a band that might get you into playing guitar because they're very guitar based, but I wouldn't have been able to name any of the guitarists in the Strokes. So what is the criteria? I think Arran might have been right. It was most influential guitarists polled by Guitar, who is a shop or an online shop, physical stores as well, selling guitars. So it might be who's the most influential guitarist that got you into buying or playing originally.
I noticed Keith Urban on that list. I reckon he's a very underrated guitarist. If he wasn't sort of, obviously famous for what he does, but as a singer-songwriter, when you actually listen to what he's doing on the guitar, when he cuts loose, very underrated in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what seems to be the biggest criteria so far is has Fender released the signature series of your guitar?
Yeah, good start. Yeah, we've got a Jim Root guitar. There's a John 5 guitar, Tom DeLonghi, Ed Sheeran.
There's a Sam Fender.
All right, I think Her has one as well.
Who's Her?
I'm only aware of Her, Her, or Her, from playing at the Super Bowl this year.
Is that like a pronoun or?
No, it's the name of the performers. I think it stands for something. Again, I'm not cool enough to know a lot of these people.
I think Brad Paisley had a Fender guitar for a while,
Right.
a Telly signature. Shanti.
Yeah. Fender.
Strangely, Guitar also had a list of the most influential Fender guitar players recently.
Wonder how much they paid for that list.
Yeah.
Kind of looks like Fender might have paid for this list as well.
It'll be interesting to know with Guitar. I couldn't find it on their website, it's on a different website. If they do sell a lot of Fenders, I get the impression that a lot of shops exist out of selling Gibsons and Fenders, and everything else is secondary to that. But that might be partly to do with the way Fender and Gibson perhaps have their deals with the stores, with how many you have to buy in and how that works.
Interesting. Also interesting, I didn't realise John 5 is playing for Motley Crue now.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Has it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, they kicked Mick Mars out a little while ago.
Yeah.
So he's the one that wrote all the music, pretty much. Where's Ray anyway? I can't see him. Good to see Ray's background. Oh, on my view, like I can only see your background. Like
oh, really?
but that's probably, I haven't looked at the actual YouTube stream for a bit, so looks like you're back there. That's just funny.
I'm here.
Have any of you ever had the urge to, or do any of you have a particular guitarist you'd like to make a guitar for?
Corey, you want to go?
No, I'd love to make one for Wes Borland. I don't know. It'd have to be a band that I'm into as well. But
I like Wes Borland's his modified guitars, because years ago I was watching an interview with him where he went to the Jackson at this factory, and I think they gave him like a left-handed King V, right? And he loved it, and so he had to like flip the Floyd to be right-handed and flip the controls, and he basically said, "I made it my own," and I really love that. And now he's got a white Rhodes, which he also customized. I think they're just so cool looking. Like he's got this he's a very artistic guy.
Yeah,
he's got a really good eye.
He's got a V that's got like he's painted like hula dancers on and everything.
Yeah, I love his.
He's real
guitars. So if you were to build one like for him, Corey, would you kind of build it based on his style, or would you just do something totally custom?
I don't know. I'd get his input, obviously. I think there's no use making something if like he's already got 20 of or whatever. But no, his art's like really quirky and everything too. Like he paints his hand cabinets. Like,
oh, that's right.
And he's got artwork on a couple of pedals he designed as well. So they're like collector's piece because they're like, there's only about 500 made, and then that's it. He did both. Like he went to art school or something. And apparently, oh, you don't like your studies, you must have ADD or something. And they got him on like ADD drugs and everything back in the day. But like he makes his own costumes and
he sounds like such an interesting person. I was very dismissive when I was younger of people that dressed up to play. So I didn't listen to Slipknot for ages because I thought they were just idiots and they probably can't write music. I now absolutely love them. I assume Wes Baldwin was probably not a very good guitarist, trying to make up for it by his looks. And the other day I heard some Buckethead stuff, some solo stuff. All amazing people, and I've just overlooked them for literally judging a book.
If you talk to anyone, like anyone that knows like Wes Baldwin's stuff, everyone will say he's underrated.
Yeah,
like just riffs, he's clean delay, little licks that he plays. It's all, and he does like heaps of stuff with the whammy bar, like rhythmically, like it's just yeah.
He did some.
I
really
always
good
thought
stuff
that
with his,
Limp
like,
Bizkit held him back.
was that me?
I was just saying, I always thought that Limp Bizkit, that sound from them always held Borland back. There was, I could hear some of the weirdest and wackiest and craziest sounds coming from them, yet they never seemed to explore what he was doing. And, I really think it was a real shame.
What were you saying, Mark?
Oh, years ago, he used to have his ex-wife. Well, when he was with his wife, they started a kind of a little band. It was so good. The music was like, you could tell that finally he opened up.
Oh,
it was, yeah, so I think it's Queen Kong, yeah.
Yeah.
And they made some really great music together. Like, it was pretty darn good.
I love his solo stuff. Like he's got this band that started as a joke called Big Dumb Face.
Yeah.
And it's got like pitch shift vocals and like drum machines and everything. It's just wacky, really wacky shit. Like some of the vocals sound like demons and some of them sound like munchkins and stuff. I probably only like it because he's done it, to be honest.
Well, that's a way into something. Like back to the guitar list, I used to play in a covers band, and the main person sort of driving the covers band, he for many years would, wherever he went, he'd just find a way to get up on stage somewhere with his guitar and sing. He seemed to be at weddings, even when he was on holiday. There were photos of him playing, singing, and he loved Ed Sheeran. And it was because of the sort of songwriting and the basicness of being able to play his songs live just with him and a guitar. And he really went out and bought, what was it? It was like it wasn't a parlor guitar. I think it might have been a bit smaller. Or maybe it was a parlor guitar that Ed Sheeran's signature guitar was. And it was all because of how much he was inspired by that just ability to sing and play. And I'd never really thought about why someone would have a signature guitar unless they were a great guitarist, really. But clearly it's also because they've got such a massive fan base, they're going to sell a lot. It just seemed odd for a company to approach someone who wasn't necessarily well known for their guitar playing. But I hadn't thought about the fact that they are well known because so many people, when they're learning guitar, just learn a few chords, and that's how you can perform. Play at a party or whatever. Anyway, look, I think that maybe we're hitting the end of the road for today's show. I'm very intrigued still by the whole Tonewood thing and this idea that there is a difference, but it's so subtle. And maybe all of those boutique builders and Paul Reed Smith are right about things. But I prefer Mark's approach, which is all guitars should be different, don't need to know why, just experience it.
Yeah. As I was saying, does it make a difference? Yeah. Does it matter? Nah. Not at all.
I've got a friend with a couple of Satriani signature guitars that he's taken to shows to be signed by Satriani, and he doesn't really play them, and they're just like, because they've been signed, they're display pieces or kept away pieces. But yeah, they do look amazingly well built.
Yeah, they used to have trouble with the chrome ones that he used to do, like the finish.
Yeah, cool.
But going back to Steve Vai, like, has his guitars labeled because they all sound different. And he said, like, some of them, just the way the woods, like some of the woods in harmony with each other, like in, I don't really know theory, but he's got Flow and Evo, and he said they all, like, just tapping on the wood, he says it sounds different.
I think that's a given that, you know, doing stuff like that, yeah, you're obviously going to hear a difference. Acoustically, yeah, material makes all the difference. It's just once it's plugged in, that's where everything changes. It's because it's all done. You know, the sound on an electric guitar is all created.
Don't know what happened. Oh, there we go. Not just me. I disappeared, and then I jumped back on, and I noticed it was still going live. So I thought I'll press rejoin. Glitch in the system again.
That's the first time I've been booted since I've been doing this.
Right, so I was going to share something. Trying to share it.
About Tonewood.
Yeah, nothing.
So hopefully this will share with the sound on it.
Let's see.
Oh, and it's not playing.
Oh yeah, that.
Oh, something's going wrong with my. So it's basically. We give up on the share, I think. Sorry, it's not playing so well, but basically he's got a series of videos from Rust Guitars where he's taking his Bluetooth speaker and trying it out on different resonant things just to see how good really the
That's
body
100% not the same thing, though. It's like not the same thing at all.
I find it so funny. I love it.
You know, it just seeing the small factory there reminds me of a video I saw just the other day that I'm not too sure how I feel about it. So I saw it on Instagram, and it's basically a white box or a white label guitar manufacturer in the US. So essentially their whole deal is they make guitar bodies for other guitar builders. Now we're not talking kits. We're basically, they make Stratocaster bodies, Tele bodies, Les Paul bodies, and they sell them off in bulk to, places. They wouldn't say, they wouldn't give names, but essentially, they hinted at like Jackson and BC Rich, a few other different companies. So they've got this whole factory set up, and the deal behind the video was that they'd started a GoFundMe page because they were trying to revolutionize the way that guitars are being built. And they want to build more bodies to sell at a cheaper price to get out to these manufacturers. And the thought that was crossing my head was, okay, that's kind of cool. But on the same hand, it's devaluing the work of all of those luthiers out there. And yeah, I just didn't know how to feel about that one. So I thought, I'll ask you guys.
I thought that part of what they were doing was to make guitars for charity.
That's kind of what they hinted in their video, in the Instagram video. And then when you go to the GoFundMe page, no.
Right.
No,
I think that
there was nothing about fundraising for charities.
it's just like a weird. How does capitalism work if all you're doing is trying to make things? Well, no, ignore that. You're making things cheap to mass produce them, sell more of them to make more profit. It's still it's not like they're trying to make less profit.
It was just and I know like
Demand.
Brad and I had this discussion before that people want quality but they don't like paying for it, and as builders we need to charge the right amount for the work that's actually being done. Instead of like, if you look at how much you sold your last guitar for and how many hours you put into it, you probably worked for less than minimum wage.
Yeah, that company is here in town, so they're here in Austin. I don't know them, and they never reach out to me. But I know that they're hurting, and it makes perfect sense. Like, building guitars is not as lucrative as it may seem, and certainly not as glamorous as we all think it is. And I think they fell into that trap, because they have a huge space out I think it's in South Austin, and they're just probably not making ends meet.
Well, I think one of the things I wasn't, I guess surprised me, because to me it was very obvious, is you take a look at, let's say Fender. Let's remove who Fender are and just look at the guitars that they build. They have like 4, maybe 5 shapes. That's that is the basis of their business. Gibson do the same. They've only got a handful of guitar shapes. They only do a handful of models. They have 100 different variations of that, but the body's exactly the same between them. Whereas what these guys were trying to do and expand into was basically doing all of the bodies, all the different shapes. And they're talking like 100, hundreds of models that they can build right there in their shop. And so like, are you trying to, expand too far, too quick? And, if that was your business model that got you into this position in the first place, maybe you need to review that. And, trying to build everything is not going to be what's going to win it for you.
That's the sense that their aspirations are just a little bit too ambitious.
But I just didn't like that mindset of they're trying to build more to sell cheaper so that guitar players can buy quality guitars for less. And as a customer, like, sounds kind of cool. But, you know, from this side of the table on the same hand, it's devaluing the work that, you know, the local luthier is doing.
I mean, we all know we can buy more for less already by buying some of the cheap budget brands, because they're actually all pretty good. And with a little bit of a setup, sometimes doesn't even need that. They're great. So maybe they're just trying to compete with the overseas market for the production of those cheap bodies.
Maybe. But when they're talking about a guitar body being built for $20,
well, you know, yeah, maybe. I don't know how much Jackson pay for their Indonesian models, bodies to be built. But if they could do it over here, over there in America, would they do it? Because then it's not their American series that they've launched, where the American series is meant to evoke better
conspiracy.
Quality. Sorry?
The conspiracy. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, my conspiracy.
Where's my tinfoil?
$30 guitars.
I wonder how many guitars I would have to build, how many bodies I'd have to build to get the cost down to £20 per body. That's a lot of wood I'd have to buy in bulk to reduce it down to that.
My understanding was it was $20 for a finished guitar, not necessarily like loaded with hardware, but paint or nitro or whatever was all applied and ready to rock.
I don't believe it.
No.
So I'm using cans of spray paint at the moment because I haven't got my spray gun set up. And the paint I use, I need a sealer, a paint colour, and at least one can of top coat. And the cans are over £20 each. It's hard to imagine that you could, I could ever, even if I was to buy it in bulk and use my spray gun, get it that cheap. Anyway, maybe I should have followed the link. I started to follow it and then got distracted, as I always do at the moment. Distracted by guitar pedals. Obsession that I blame this podcast for.
Did you get the cat pedal?
Sorry, what was that?
Did you get the cat pedal?
No. Although, you know those Miku pedals, they sell for so much. I'm intrigued whether investing in a cat pedal now will have that same value in 20 years. It won't, will it?
What if you put the Miku into the cat pedal into the fart pedal? Probably just sound like them. Yeah, those Mikus, they didn't make many of them though, did they?
I don't know enough about them. But I remember seeing them for sale for like a normal amount when they came out.
Yeah.
There's some interesting things being done with them. I don't know if you know the Simon the Magpie YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I love it when someone takes something and makes it more usable. I mean, obviously, it's more usable is also subjective to how you use it. But yeah, it seems to have more playability with that. I just bought a TC Electronic phaser, and it's so loud when you switch it on. The jump's quite loud, and I've just seen quite a few people just put a little resistor on the inside. But just the thought of putting a little pot in there or something to make it a little bit more usable seems quite straightforward. I'm sort of surprised it wasn't there. I was going through my pedals to try and sell things off so I can buy some new ones, and I found this box. At some point I must have bought some DIY pedals, and I started to assemble them and never finished, and now they're all just in a box. I can't work out what they are, so I'm gonna have to go. I think one of them might actually just be a buffer from the circuit, but I need to look more into the circuits because I'm not knowledgeable on that. Whereas, someone that builds pedals could just look at it and recognize the chipset and probably a couple of the resistors on it and say, that's exactly what this is.
Just put them together, it'll be a lucky dip.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about plugging it in. Something happened to me yesterday, which has never happened before. I had, I haven't got it handy. I had a clip for a PP3 9-volt battery clipped on the battery and the two wires were exposed. Normally, I'm using these batteries and these battery clips all the time, and sometimes I just have it clipped on and I'm touching things to check the connections work. And then suddenly I had a massive shock and there was a burning smell, and I had a burn on my finger. So I don't know, it's never happened before. I guess the two ends of the wire either touched next to my finger and caused the spark, or somehow embedded in my finger, and the current just went through the skin or something. It wasn't that painful, but it was a bit of a surprise, and the smell lingered for a little while.
Are you watching the chat, Daniel?
Oh God, I've gone off the chat.
I got distracted by reading the chat.
I've got to read the chat.
Just pedal talk.
So what I'm going to suggest is anyone watching this in the future on YouTube, go and read the chat.
I have a quick guitar story if we have time.
Oh yes.
I just went to a exhibit here at one of the local museums, and I got to see Stevie Ray Vaughan's #1 guitar in person, and he also had Jimmy Vaughan's guitar, Hank Williams' guitar. I saw Lucille. I saw Bo Diddley's. I mean, basically, just an amazing exhibit of all these actual guitars. I saw Prince's cloud guitar, like crazy. Anyway, I thought this might be a really cool little anecdote. I had read just recently, that's a month ago, article on Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar tech, where his tech actually had to go to Stevie and say, "This is the last fret job we're doing, and after this we have to retire this neck on his #1." And Stevie's like, "Why? Why do we have to do that?" He's like, "Because every time I have to refret, I have to resurface the fretboard, and we've done it so many times that there's no rosewood left. So this is the last time." And I didn't believe it, right? I took pictures. I went to go see #1, and I kind of look at it at the side, because this is in a glass case, right? And I look at the side profile of the neck, and there's literally just a millimeter, half a millimeter of rosewood. I mean, there's no rosewood. It's just a facade. It's like a veneer, thinner than a veneer of just rosewood. And I look on the other side for the side dots, and all the side dots are gone. Like, they had resurfaced this fretboard so many times because he's a big, strong guy with big hands. He refretted so many times, and I never believed that story until I saw it with my own eyes. Like, there's no fretboard on that guitar. I thought that was a cool story.
That's cool. I've heard that. I've read that before, like years ago. So that's really cool to hear someone that actually has seen that, to see what it looks like.
Sound like this couldn't be true. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's true. That would make the neck noticeably thinner as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, and so the tech was saying we have to replace the neck because I can't go any lower on the saddles. Like, the saddles on the bridge won't go any lower. That's it. We're done.
Then you'd have to shim the neck.
Something like that. Yeah.
Didn't Stevie? I don't know a lot about him, but didn't he play really heavy string gauges?
Oh yeah, like 13s or something heavier, right?
It was from memory. It was kind of a weird mix because it wasn't like 13 to 60 or anything like that. It was, no, and you'll have to look it up.
But another observation I made, because I got to see like all these old vintage guitars in real life, and I took a lot of photos. And so again, I'm going to just go down the list real quick. I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar. I saw Jimmy Vaughan's guitars, old guitars, Hank Williams, Prince's guitar, B.B. King's, basically everybody's guitars there, Bo Diddley. And one of the things that I kept noticing over and over and over again were the fret jobs. I'm looking at these fret jobs, and no one crowned their frets. They're all flat crowned. So they could tell they did their level, and then that's it. There was no crowning in any of these guitars. I thought that was really interesting observation.
That's what they used to do with Black Beauties.
Yeah.
You give some Black Beauty Les Pauls. They used to level them off, not crown them.
I've heard that.
They used to call them the fretless wonders.
Similar with Brian May's Red Special. That's what, on the stuff I've read on his, that he's never had them the frets dressed ever since he built it. So apparently he's had the 0 fret replaced a number of times. But yeah, apparently all of the frets are super flat, and because he uses such light gauge strings and he's got like such a light touch, he's used to it. But if anyone else plays his Red Special, they have a lot of trouble playing it because the frets have just worn away that much over time, and he's never had them touched up or changed ever.
Amazing. Is this your next bit of research, Mark? Which step can we get rid of on our guitars now?
Well, it made me think of you, Danny. I'm like, maybe we should get on the podcast texts from back in the day, because I'm kind of curious how they worked on guitars, all these guitar techs on the road back in the day. Like, why didn't they crown? Like, what was this? What stopped them?
Right, that's an excuse for me to get in contact with that tech guy that I spoke to a while ago, who was very interesting, but somehow I lost track with him. Who used to work for he worked for Steve Vai. He worked for the guy in Duran for some reason, and started off with Frank Zappa. Mental guy. This guy's so interesting. I don't know why I lost track. I think the main reason I lost track with him, it was hard to work out how to communicate because we're in different. He was in America, and it was just trying to get the times right at the time. So I kept having to get up in the middle of the night. We can do it, so there must have been a way.
Yeah, but he's rock and roll, mate. If I wake up at midday.
Exactly. Oh, do you know? I said I heard Glyn the other day, and I thought, wow, I didn't know he could play well. Just to end on this, I heard a clip the other day of a song, and it was being played live. And I was thinking, this is just such a cool riff. It was a bass riff, and the guitar was mirroring it. And then it cut into a solo, and it was Nuno Betancourt, who I've never really listened to, because when I was a kid, I always thought Extreme. There were 2 reasons I didn't like Extreme: More Than Words, and one of my neighbours who I didn't get on with was an Extreme fan. So I just assumed they were terrible. Not that More Than Words was terrible. It just wasn't heavy enough for me. But oh my God, he's incredible.
Yeah, he worshipped Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, amazing. What was the song called? It was off one of their early albums. I listened to the song. That I didn't really like the song in the end. I just liked the riff and the song. It was called Hip Today, off of Waiting for the Punchline. Great solo. Right. On that note, next week we're doing it at the same time as this one, but we've got Brad on from BB Guitars. Was that a sigh from Corey then?
Nah, Brad's all right. He's a decent bloke. For those of you that don't know, webcam.
Brad is incredibly active on the Facebook group.
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
No. He comments. That's all he does. He set it up, but he doesn't do nothing on it.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll stop giving him credit. There's doubt in the chat whether he's real or not. Cool. And then we're fast approaching our 50th episode. I'm trying to sort something special out for that.
I'd just like to say, in regards to those, is Brad even real? I have met the man.
Yeah.
I can confirm that someone did arrive at my doorstep and said that they were Brad. Whether they're the same people or not, I don't know.
He's in witness protection.
I heard 3 different things then, not one of them.
I said he's in witness protection.
That would make sense.
Yeah. He'll end up turning up with a mask and a blanket over his face.
And he knows my address.
Yeah, I'll worry about that.
I did just want to say one thing before we go. Let me just put this on. I've got here a guitar that has been painted by Ali from ARY Guitars. See if we can get that in the shot. And he gave it to me to do a setup on and do a little bit of a polish. He's got a Birmingham pickup from Tone Rider, which they've donated, and we're auctioning it off to try and get some money for Cancer Research UK. So I'll put a link in the bio for it. It's not bio, link in the description to the video for it. We're only trying to raise about £300, so it's a bargain to get it for that. I imagine the pickup's probably £100. And then all that time out, Ali put in the paint job as well. It's based on a very particular RAF plane, which apparently was used in the filming of the Dunkirk film that came out a few years ago. It's for charity.
Did spam the story on the collective with that too, Daniel.
Oh yes, okay, I'll do that.
Try to get heaps of people to see it.
Cheers, thanks. All right, everyone. Until next time, let us know. Spread this episode with people that will get annoyed with Tonewood Debate. That's what we want to do. I want to see it on all the forums. Cool. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Ciao.
Bye.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building process.
I think it cut then when Mark hung up. It seems to have put us back on the stream without the ending.
We're
So I'll
still
try
live
again.
too.